Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan McGuire, Manager of Professional Development at ACCE, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar. This afternoon's webinar is the next in our series, which highlights our 2017 Chamber of the Year Award winners. And we're going to hear from Sandra Wilson, President of the Paducah Area Chamber of Commerce, who will share elements of her chamber's successful advocacy program, goals, and strategies. Sandra will also walk you through one of the Chamber's recent advocacy wins, explaining how the Chamber advocated with the U.S. Department of Energy after the community's largest and longest-standing employer was forced to close. So before I turn the program over to Sandra, I do have a few housekeeping notes. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. And second, after the presentation, we will have time for some questions, which you can ask by using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question and I will read the question to Sandra. If we run out of time and don't get to your question, or if you have a question you would prefer to discuss with Sandra individually offline, you can feel free to contact her directly. Her contact information will be included in the presentation slides. I'm also, if you have a question for someone here at ACCE, feel free to get in touch with me and I will put you with the right person. If we will also get in touch with you afterwards if you ask a question and we don't get to it for time purposes. And third, this webinar is being recorded and should be up on the ACCE website on the ACC University webinar page by Monday the 23rd. And towards the end of the webinar, I will provide some more information on how to get to that webinar page. Also, the presentation slides are uploaded to the webinar panel on the right-hand side of your computer screen. You just click on the presentation to download it. If you're not able to download the presentation during the webinar for any reason, no worries. I will post the presentation slides along with the recording. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Sandra Wilson is President and CEO of the Paducah Area Chamber of Commerce. She joined the Chamber in 2013 after working for 26 years at the New Page Paper Mill in Wickliffe as their Public Affairs Manager. While at the paper mill, Sandra worked with advocacy, serving as a registered lobbyist in Kentucky and working on behalf of the company with federal affairs. As a community volunteer, Sandra was the first woman to serve as chairman of the board of the Paducah Area Chamber of Commerce in 1996, and later also as the first woman chair of the Paducah Economic Development Board. She currently serves on the boards of the Murray State Alumni Association, the Carson Center, and the Paducah-McCracken County Industrial Development Authority. On a statewide level, Sandra served as chairman of the Kentucky Manufacturers Association and currently serves on the boards of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, Leadership Kentucky, and the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce Executives. She's a graduate of Leadership Kentucky and Leadership Paducah. Sandra is a graduate of Murray State University. In 2017, the Paducah Chamber was named as ACCE Chamber of the Year. So thank you again, Sandra, for presenting today, and take it away.
Well, great. Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion today about building a positive advocacy position, and we're going to focus a little bit on the case study, as you said, of the Department of Energy. But I am very excited and humbled to have been asked to present this webinar. I do have a disclaimer I want to say. I certainly don't want to say that I'm an expert in this area or that our chamber is, but we work really hard in the area of advocacy. That's who we are, and that's what we talk about that we are. I've been involved in government affairs for many years, as you said, in different capacities. And so this is kind of a review of what has worked well for us and what we did with our Chamber of the Year presentation. So there's me and my contact information, and I will put that back up again at the very end. So here's what we're going to cover today. I want to give you a little bit of information about the Paducah Chamber, our advocacy overview, the programs that we focus on here in Paducah for our advocacy efforts. Again, we want to talk about the case study with the Department of Energy, which was one of the synopses that we used in our Chamber of the Year application. It's been a multi-year project. I will say that it started the week that before I began at the Chamber, it had already been announced that I was coming to the Chamber as the President and CEO, and right after that, in that 2-week period of time, is when the company announced that they were closing. So it was kind of a shock to have to deal with that immediately. I'm also going to talk about wins for our community with our advocacy efforts, non-dues revenue, and go over a little bit about and have time for question and answer. So the Paducah Chamber is located in Paducah, Kentucky. We're in the far western corner of the state. Our city is about 26,000, and we're part of McCracken County, which is about 65,000. But for us, we are about 1,000 members with our Paducah Chamber, and we claim to be and say that we are and fight hard to be the largest business advocacy organization in the region. We were established in 1938, and we are a 2-time winner of the ACC Chamber of the Year in 2011, before my time, but I've always been active with the Paducah Chamber. We won, and then again in 2017. So thank you, Susan, and thank you to ACC for that great honor. When you were saying that again, it kind of helped me to relive that night, and I'll give a plug for the ACC Chamber of the Year. If you've never applied, I would encourage you to apply. It's just a great honor. We are accredited by the U.S. Chamber and we're a Kentucky certified chamber. We are usually right around the 5th largest chamber in the state, behind 4 large cities. We only are at the chamber. We're not involved directly with economic development as far as the recruitment. We work with our small businesses, but as far as recruitment and traditional economic development, there's a separate organization in Paducah Economic Development for that, but we are partners and based in the same building. And then in the mid-1990s, we decided that because of the distance from Paducah to our state capital in Frankfort, that we would be better served if we had someone up there that would be representing us all the time and could keep us informed. And so we entered into a contract then with a lobbyist and have had that same contract with him since then, and it's been a great asset for our community to have him there working on our behalf all the time. We look at advocacy as the act of supporting a cause, and our goal is to always influence change, to protect our business members, and do whatever we can to improve our community. So these photos, the one on the left you're going to see, that is DOE Secretary Rick Perry. We had that meeting last September when we were up there on a DC fly-in, and I'm going to just say there were a lot of people in our community that thought that we would never get that meeting with Secretary Perry, and I'm very competitive, and I just took that on as a goal that we were going to do everything that we could because the DOE side is so important to us. He was the new Department of Energy Secretary, and we got that meeting. And sitting to his left is our Congressman, James Comer, and we actually asked him to go with us. Senator McConnell helped us to get that meeting as well. And so when we said Congressman Comer would be coming with us, I think it did help us to have that meeting. That's our new mayor sitting to Secretary Perry's right. And that was her first trip. And she's a young mayor that was just elected in the last year. The center is our state capital, and then over the right is just an example of some of our small group meetings in our capital, which is Frankfort, Kentucky. I want to share the Paducah Chamber's philosophy, and we kind of took a philosophy from another chamber, a statement that they had made about it had been said that they were known by their absence. And we took it to change to say what our philosophy is, and we announce this at anything to do with public policy. We have it in our membership brochure. But never do we want it to be said in Frankfort or in D.C. that this community never comes to visit and we're noticed only by our absence. We will be known by our presence. And that's why we take it so important to make bus trips. You can see on the left, that's a bus load of people going to the state capitol, left at 6 a.m. in the morning, got home after 10 p.m. that night. And we had a great trip where we're there. Now, we also go at other times during the year, but that one is our big bus trip. We had about 60 people from our community in the Capitol in one day. In the middle, and the picture on the right, are pictures from our most recent trip to D.C. That's our congressman in the middle, James Comer. We had our state senator go with us. That's a county judge with us and some other community leaders. For us, our success for advocacy, we believe, comes back to just showing up. And that's a big part of it. I'm sure you all have heard that phrase many times. The world is run by those who show up. So we believe strongly in that. And that's how, and we also work to build our connection year round. It's really an endeavor that you should be pursuing all the time. It's a priority that can pay big dividends if you check in with your legislators throughout the year, not just when you're needing something. Be consistent. We take advantage of every opportunity to interact with elected officials so they know who we are, they know what we care about, they know what our priorities are. It's all about building and maintaining relationships. To me, that's everything. You have to build their trust. You have to be persistent, and most of all, you always have to be honest with them. You can never, let your word or your integrity be questioned. So we look at it as an opportunity to be the connector between our local elected officials and the community. And I'm going to quote an elected official from a nearby neighborhood who has been in the chamber world and is now an elected official as a local mayor. It's okay to unashamedly and unapologetically ask for what you need. And we believe that's true. You have to fight for what you want, and you have to be vocal and be working always on taking your position to them on why it's important. It's really key to know on a state and federal level, all of your legislators, absolutely the ones in your immediate area, but other legislators from throughout your state. And this can help your legislator to be more effective, because if other people throughout your state, and this is true in Congress also, because when we're in D.C., we meet with all of the members of Congress from Kentucky because they can back up our congressmen, or in the state, they can back up your state senate. Some of them are committee chairs. They're very influential. And so if they know you and know your priorities, it really helps your local official. It's very key to know those from the administration. We try our best to know our governor. We want to make sure that that governor has visited our community. His chief of staff knows us, and then his cabinet members, and as well with the federal officials. It's very important to know their chief of staff, know who in D.C. would be making influential decisions about what your community needs. For us, we're always there about the Department of Energy, but we have a commercial airport here, so we're always trying to make sure that the person that oversees transportation issues in that member of Congress or that United States Senator's office knows about Paducah. And then also state and national associations. And I just want to give an example. We are a community very heavily into the arts. We're a UNESCO city, and we have a lot of community-based arts organizations here. So we always meet with the Americans for the Arts, and we meet with the National Endowment for the Arts as well. And on one of our trips to D.C., when we were in a meeting with the National Endowment for the Arts, they mentioned all of their grant programs and really talked about why Paducah might not be taking as much advantage as we should be of some of those programs. And they offered to come to Paducah and to do a training about applying for grants. And we needed to go through our senator, so we did that and asked them to help us to get the NEA to come to Paducah, do that. They came, our arts organizations participated. The chamber took a big lead in that to show them around our community. And that person that was here really just fell in love with our community. He helped our city to get a grant for signage in our downtown area. And then our Market House Theater, community-based theater, ended up applying for a large grant for a capital investment program that they have going on right now to expand their buildings. And they ended up getting, I believe it was a $75,000 grant from NEA, one of the first ones and the largest ones that we had received. And a lot of that, I will take credit, happened from the relationships that we built when we were in D.C. And then I'm going to say work closely with your other chambers and associations in your state. We know who to call when we need their support, and I hope that other chambers, especially in Kentucky, know that they can always call us. We built those coalitions when we were working on an issue that just had to do with lifting the nuclear moratorium in Kentucky. We were the primary community that would be impacted by that, but we reached out to other communities throughout the state, asking them to please ask their legislators to support lifting that, and we did finally get that done, and they were all very gracious and helped us the way they could. So always network. Everybody knows that in the chamber world about networking, but it's just really, really very important that you support each other. Now, this is something that I just kind of put in there because we've just finished this very trying session in Kentucky with the General Assembly. And there were times during this session that we, as a government affairs staff, took issues to our board of directors or to our business advocacy committee that we just thought was just, a no-brainer. And we would get they would become a mountain. And the same thing happened in the state legislature, and it happens every day in DC as well. Issues that we think are just so simple, why don't they get the momentum and move forward and pass? But there are going to be those times that are so frustrating because an issue that you feel like is just the most simple thing in the world will become a mountain, and you may or may not be able to convince people to your position. And the same will happen with positions that you take as a chamber with your own legislature. It's just, I guess it's just the nature of the beast. And this past session here was very frustrating, and I called our lobbyist one day because I wanted our chamber to take a position on something that was just very simple that our local government actually was asking for, and I was having some pushback on it. And he just kind of said, well, welcome to my world. It happens every day. So it's just a good reminder that, to me, things that seem really simple can just become a huge mountain. For us, some of our challenges is we have a 4-hour drive to our state capital. We're on the central time zone in Kentucky, and they're on the eastern time zone. So we can't just run over to the state capitol for a quick meeting, or just run over to listen in to a committee, or just to be there for a few minutes. It has to be pretty planned out, and it can be pretty expensive because if the trip's in the morning, of course you have to go the night before, and you're looking at a lot of additional expenses. But it's absolutely worth it, again, to overcome that challenge, to show up and to be there. Here is the chamber strategic plan that we have, and we have as number one, and we say sometimes that they're not prioritized, but business advocacy is our top priority. We want to be the voice of the local, state, and federal issues that positively or adversely affect our members and the region. So if we're going to claim that we're the region's largest business advocacy organization, we got to live that. It's who we are, and it's what we do and what we want to be every day for our members and for our region. Here are some of the programs that we have. We do have a very strong business advocacy committee, and they meet monthly, and they will bring in speakers throughout the year to vet certain topics on positions that we may want to take. They listen to a lot of experts that come in. We really appreciate our state chamber, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Their business advocacy personnel will call in to us. We have call-ins with our member of Congress, Congressman Comer, and from other staff members from our elected officials. And then we also have our elected officials come in and talk with our committee so that we know exactly what's going on and are fully informed before we may take a vote as a business advocacy committee. That is generally always the first step before a position goes to our board of directors to vote on. As I mentioned, we have a contract lobbyist. We're one of only a few chambers in the state with one, but we feel like it's very beneficial for us, and especially because of the distance. Myself, and then we have a Vice President of Government Affairs, focus a lot of attention on government affairs, on our trips to our state capital, and on our DC, and all of the other things that we do. We develop a legislative agenda for our state, and then also one for our federal issues. And we publicize those and post those on our website and communicate those with our elected officials. We have a priority project selection. This honestly used to be more important when our state had money that they could help fund projects in your community. Now, a lot of us in Kentucky, it ends up just coming down to more transportation issues because there is no money for really funding things like we used to have. And I'll show those pictures later. But one year we fought really hard to get funding for Performing Arts Center, and we ended up getting over $20 million to Paducah for that center. But that's pretty much unheard of these days. We do have our trips. We take at least one large trip to D.C. every year, and then we sometimes have a small group trips that go to, again, being consistent and being persistent to be there. State capital trips, meet the candidate forums for local and state political races. In Kentucky, we had no races in 2017. 2018 is bringing in quite a bit, and there's a lot of interest, and all of our elected officials on the statewide level have opposition coming up this year, so we will have that. We have a monthly breakfast, so that has about 350 people attend, and usually if we're having a forum like that, it'll push it up even to closer to 400. We have a public policy series we started a couple of years ago so that we could bring in speakers. Senator McConnell, who's the majority leader for the United States Senate, kicked that off for us a couple of years ago and helped us to establish that program. communications with elected officials, and then lobbying. And I want to just be sure to say, if you are lobbying and you have a lobbyist, it's very important that you follow all state and federal guidelines. In Kentucky, from several years ago, we had some issues, and so we have very strict guidelines about lobbying and being a registered lobbyist versus just being there to lobby. So make sure you're always doing that. These are some guidelines that we developed for our Business Advocacy Committee. It really became apparent to us that we needed to do that because we have representation on our Business Advocacy Committee. We try to have it from all of our major sectors of employment here, but we also tend to have several people that are retired that still want to stay active with us, and that's the committee that they seem to gravitate to and they like the best. So we had to develop some guidelines asking them to always please put their personal beliefs aside. Because, you know, there are some people that are never, ever going to be for any kind of tax increase, or they're always going to be supportive of something that maybe our business community wouldn't have been supportive of. So we try to make sure that before they vote on a position that we would be taking, number one, that they have been in the meeting to hear all of the discussion, the pros and cons about a specific issue, and to number two, to make sure that they're looking at what would be best for the business community overall and putting their own personal beliefs aside. And that's worked really well for us, and we're very appreciative of the people that spend a lot of time. We actually had to extend some of our meetings coming up getting ready for our General Assembly, so they were more like an hour and a half, almost to 2 hours. So we fed them for a monthly meeting to do that. And this on the right is just a copy of our 2018 legislative agenda and some of the things that we took a position on, pension reform, workers' comp, tax reform, and essential skills for our school systems, and a lot of things. So we overall had a pretty good session in Kentucky and a lot of wins for things that we were supportive of. This was just some things and examples of our trip to Frankfort, to our state capital. We tried very much to have a regional approach. And so this year, when we were up there for our day in Frankfort, we had a luncheon with 4 other chambers from the region. And this is a picture of the 5 chamber execs with Terry Gill, who's the Secretary for Economic Development for Kentucky. And he came and spoke to us and really about what was economic development in Kentucky and the challenges, and he knew who our communities were and addressed it to all of those, what would be specific for us. We have small group meetings throughout the day when we're there. This is the one on the right is our arts district. That's our Arts and Heritage Secretary for the state of Kentucky, and our Convention and Visitors Bureau person is on the left talking to him and briefing him about our community. On the right, we had a reception, and 6 of our area state legislators were there for us. So we really see results from the regional approach and enjoy working with our other chambers as much as we can. These are some random photos also. This was on the left was a forum for the lieutenant governor candidates about 2 years ago. Of course, Senator McConnell in the middle with our public policy series, Congressman Comer on the bottom right, and then again, we were so pleased to have that meeting with Secretary Rick Perry of the Department of Energy. I have that picture in there as well. So for our case study that we just chose to focus on for the ACCE Chamber of the Year, our largest employer had been the Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant in May of 2013 is when they announced they were going to close. So we actually had to go into a totally different mode and a different mindset and different fight for our community to make sure that they were going to clean up that site and try to keep the employment as much as we could where it was and put longer contracts in. So we really narrowed our advocacy focus very much on working with the Department of Energy. Those were new contacts for us to have to make. So we really wanted to make sure adequate funding was going to be there for that cleanup. Of course, we had to protect our local environment. And then the very first contract that they announced that they would award for cleanup was just for 3 years. And, that really doesn't work well for people moving into a community or people needing that stability of longer-term contract for their jobs. So these were some of the objectives that we took on because the economic future of our local community, we really felt like it was just dependent on our success of fighting for this. So we started working on longer-term relationships, building those with the Department of Energy. We encouraged them to come to Paducah. We went to D.C. and then invited them here. And I will just highlight that in 2015, they did come to Paducah, and it was the first time that higher level had been to Paducah. And we had a tour of the site, we had a community reception, and then we had a very small reception for them in a meeting with some of our chamber officials and our economic development officials. And during that meeting, I still to this day say they did not come to Paducah to extend this invitation. It became apparent during the meeting that it came out of a spur of the moment. They asked us if we would like to have a permanent display in the DOE headquarters in D.C. We would be only the 5th community in the country to have that honor. So the first thing out of my mouth when they said that was, can we unveil it at our D.C. trip in September? And I think this was about March or April. But we were able to pull it together. The floor was the contractor for the DOE side at that point, and they knew what it would take, and they did had a designer that could help us with it. And then we wanted to make sure that we were achieving a stable funding level for them, and we've been very consistent at $270 million for the site for cleanup each year. Our employment level that we really wanted was to maintain that around 1,300 to 1,500 employees. Right now, the DOE level in their mind was about 1,100 to 1,300, and that's where they are now, at about 1,300. Some of the methodology that we used, again, we got our community very much involved, our business advocacy committee, our board. We started working very closely with the DOE contractors that were already here working. We took, some of our DC trips, a big focus of that became just on DOE. We had to do all of the coordination and design of the big display in DC, and we were able to pull that off and have that as a big unveiling ceremony. And at the time, then it was DOE Secretary Ernie Moniz, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and our Congressman Ed Whitfield at the time. And we've had very positive results from that. Here are just some of the results. We regularly meet with the Department of Energy officials. They have offices in Lexington. Anytime they come here, they call and we have those meetings with them. They always meet with us when we're in D.C. They've been to Paducah, and we recently had Rick Perry in Paducah with Senator McConnell for a visit of the Paducah DOE site. We did the unveiling of the display. We have achieved stable funding. In fact, this year we have a little bit of an increase. We had a bump up to about $273 million, but that's around the area that we want to stay, 270 to 273, with employment at about 1,300. As I mentioned, the first contract was 3 years. We were very a little upset about that, or at least not happy with it as we should be. And so we started pushing for longer term contracts. So we got that with a 5-year that was announced, and 2 renewals of 3 and 2. So it's basically about a 10-year contract. This is a permanent display. I just want to show this because we're so proud of it. And it was just a highlight for us. It was very much of a proud moment for us to have this big ceremony. And there's the wall display. It's huge. It's 20 feet long and 5 feet tall. And there's some of the things from the announcement that day and from the big unveiling ceremony. So our efforts continue every year. This is just kind of a highlighting of our trip in 2017 was our 15th trip to D.C., and this is just some statistics. In about 48 hours, we had 47 people from a community of 26,000 in D.C. that had all paid their own way to get there. We had over 30 speakers, 22 meetings. We had 5 Kentucky congressmen that came and met with us, 2 cabinet secretaries, and the Senate Majority Leader. So we added that as a very successful trip. We had a great meeting with the Department of Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, and we were so excited in the meeting with her, we didn't even get any pictures. So anytime we've had to communicate about our trip with her, we just have to show her picture. Also, as I mentioned, Secretary Perry, we met with him. He was just in Paducah, and Secretary Chao is coming to Paducah May 3rd to kick off our 2018 Public Policy Series. Of course, she does have Kentucky ties, as she's married to our U.S. Senator and lives in Kentucky, so it works out really well that she's coming to Kentucky right before the Derby to be here, and then she did agree to come to Paducah. And those are some pictures from having Secretary Perry here. Again, showing up, being persistent, making your case will help you to have some results. So we're just very happy that he was just recently here. That was spring break week for us, so I was a little worried about how it might go over, but we were able to have a group meeting with him out at the DOE site. So that's him right in the middle. Advocacy absolutely will translate to wins for your community. This is our Governor Bevin and all of our state legislators. For many years, we had worked to get a statewide nuclear moratorium lifted, primarily because after the plant closed, we felt like there's so much developable land out there that could be used for something maybe related to nuclear, a small modular reactor or anything. And in order to do that, though, we had to get the statewide nuclear moratorium lifted, and we had been working on it for about 3 or 4 sessions and finally got it done. And Governor Bevin came to Paducah to do a ceremonial signing for that. As I mentioned, there's our Performing Arts Center. We did get $22 million for that from the state. On the left is our University of Kentucky. They have one satellite location, the College of Engineering in Kentucky, and it's here in Paducah. And that was for economic development efforts. And both of those 2 projects came to highlight about the same time for us, and our community kind of had to prioritize which one we were going to go for first. And so we've been very successful in lobbying in Frankfort for state funding. And on the bottom, on the right, is our School of Art and Design. Primarily for that one, we didn't get money from the state, but we got the ability for a community college to bond money for a new project. Before that, the community college is one system. They were not able to have separate bonding for each college. And if it was changed, the state law was changed where if they could raise 20% of their own money, they could bond the other 80%. So that is one building of a 3-building campus in our downtown area for the School of Art and Design. And these are just some others that we have worked on in our community that we're very proud of. The Murray State Building, we worked with our local government, and they actually bonded the money to put a campus here in Paducah for Murray State. I'm just going to mention that we use our advocacy efforts very much as non-dues revenue for our chamber. We charge for participation if they go to Frankfort, if they go to DC, or if they attend any of our events. We secure sponsorships for all of that, and we have it. It's a very critical part of our overall budget. So it is a big part of our non-dues revenue for our chamber. And with that, I will kind of wrap up here and be happy to answer any questions that might come my way.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. Now, if you all have any questions, Sandra's would welcome any questions from you. What you need to do is just type your questions in at the question box. You click on that little triangle next to questions, type it in, and we will see the questions here. And I'll ask Sandra. So go ahead and type them in, and we welcome any questions. In the meantime, while we're waiting, I'll just remind you that we have recorded this webinar. It is being recorded, and it will be posted on our ACCE website on our webinar page, and it should be there tomorrow or Monday at the latest. You can find our webinar page by clicking on, first getting to our website, www.acce.org, clicking on Professional Development, hover over ACC University, and then click on Webinars. And then you can just go through any of the webinars there, click on the thumbnails to listen to any recordings. All right, so I don't see any, oh, here we go. Here's a question. You have a contract lobbyist. However, do you and the VP of Government Affairs register as lobbyists?
We do not. He is the only one registered for us. There's a fine line of where you have to register in Kentucky. If we are going to be lobbying on a specific issue, we would have to be, but for us being there just generally lobbying on behalf of the Paducah Chamber, we have made the determination we do not have to be registered lobbyists.
Okay.
So I would check your own state guidelines very closely for that.
Okay. Let's see, no other questions right now. So it looks like we are close to wrapping up. Let me just let you all know about our next webinar. It is going to be on Thursday, May 2nd at 2 p.m. East Coast time, and it's going to feature Huntsville-Madison County Chamber President and CEO Chip Cherry. Chip's going to talk about how the Huntsville-Madison County Chamber transitioned its aging TRC program into a dynamic new program. He'll cover the factors leading to the decision to make the change, the challenges associated with developing the Chamber's new program, and the rewards realized because the new program was aligned with the goals of the Chamber. So if you're considering a change to your TRC program, this webinar is going to be a great one to join. You can register for it on our ACCE events page, which you can get to by clicking on professional development, hovering over events, and navigating to and clicking on upcoming webinars. So I guess that's it. So thank you so much, Sandra, for taking the time to present today's webinar and all the great information. And congratulations on the Chamber of the Year win and for the really great advocacy win that you achieved with regard to the Department of Energy site. And thank you everyone else for joining us today and for your participation. Hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you, or virtually, I guess, at our next webinar on May 3rd. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.